to Cosy Reads, and I am still on my winter break and I'm going back to work in 2 days, and I do not feel rested and relaxed enough for that. So over the next couple of days I'm planning to just read a really cozy book, get myself all soothed and ready to go back to work. And I thought about what book was best to read for a cozy vlog, and I was torn between a murder mystery, an Agatha Christie. They are just cozy, they're my comfort books. And then I remembered I have got Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, and I have heard that this book is so cozy and just lovely, and I decided I want to read this. So I'm gonna read this and just relax and try and have a nice end to my holidays. So this book is about Viv. Viv is an orc who's looking for a change of pace and wants to open a coffee shop. She is used to quests, adventures, battles, and is just looking for a little bit of a peaceful life. I know that there might be a little bit of mild peril just based on the blurb, but the book does describe itself as high fantasy, low stakes, which makes me think that it's going to be a really fun, relaxing read, and that is exactly what I'm looking for. So let's just try and have a couple of days of relaxation before work. I have had a very, very relaxing morning and afternoon, and I'm now halfway through this book, and it is so cozy. It's like the reading equivalent of playing Animal Crossing. It's just like a hug for the brain. So while I'm halfway through the book, it did only take me about an hour and a half of reading. I was doing 30 minutes of reading and then 30 minutes of doing something else that I wanted to do but probably haven't made time for during my winter break, and then go back to reading. So it really is a speedy little read. I feel like I'm whizzing through it even though I'm not trying to. So far I've met Viv, I've fallen in love with Viv, I love her, and she has come fresh off of a quest, and at the beginning she finds this building that she wants to become her coffee shop, and most of the first half is about actually just setting up the coffee shop, and we get to meet Cal, who is like her builder architect, and he's just so lovely. He's a little bit grumbly, man of very few words. So I'm really enjoying their friendship building, and I really enjoyed the parts of putting together the coffee shop. I really liked that it was really described, and it was like I was there too, watching this montage of this coffee shop turning from, oh, what was it? Like a stable, was it a stable? Let's go stable, to a coffee shop, and just their plans and their dreams for the future with that shop. There is an assistant to Viv at the coffee shop called Tandri, and she's a succubus. And I'm really liking the way that I've read quite a lot of books that include a succubus character or characters, and they are always the sort of what you would expect of kind of character, but Tandri is different and is kind of just trying to fight against the negative connotations that always follow her. And I can see, I see some bubblings between Tandri and Viv, and I don't know if that's just me hoping for what I'm hoping for, but there's some little rumblings, and I'm really excited to see what happens between those two. It just kind of feels like they're quite the partnership. And the book has also introduced Thimble, and I love Thimble. Is Thimble my favourite? Thimble might be my favourite. And he is a ratkin. I didn't take notes. He is basically this guy. And he is a baker, and And he is a baker, and the town are just going wild for all of his baked goods. And it's just the descriptions of, I am a coffee girl. I love coffee. I have been drinking coffee in excess since I was 13. I'm pretty sure that I bleed coffee, maybe. But I mean, I really love coffee, but the descriptions of the coffee in this book just, oh, I've been drinking even more coffee today because every time it's described, I'm like, oh, I could go for a coffee. And I got a new coffee machine for Christmas. My parents got one for my partner and I. So in addition to making gorgeous filter coffee like I normally do, I can make espresso. And that's dangerous because I've been drinking many espresso while reading this delightful book about coffee. And the descriptions of the food as well. I'm not a baked good girl, I'm a savoury person. But the cinnamon rolls just sound, oh, I want a cinnamon roll. And I have actually heard that there is a recipe at the back of this book. So I have got plans to make that recipe if I have the ingredients. I haven't checked the recipe yet, so I don't know if I have the ingredients. There has been a little bit of, not quite peril yet, but I can see that there's going to be a little bit of, maybe like a little conflict. And there's been a few characters that are shady and I'm very suspicious of them. And I like that Viv is very protective of her newfound friends and of her coffee shop. And she is not willing to let those people come and ruin a nice day. So I'm very excited to find out what happens with those potential conflicts. And there's like an underworld kind of organised crime boss as well who's been mentioned. So I'm excited to find out what happens there too. I've got some suspicions that they might not be quite what they seem just because of this kind of book where everything's so cozy and lovely that I think it would almost spoil the book to have some sort of Fat Tony from The Simpsons kind of character. And yes, that is pretty much where all of my organised crime references come from. It's The Simpsons. So I'm absolutely loving this book so far. It is cozy, it is sweet, it is fun. I am rooting for the characters. I want good things to happen to all of the characters with the exception of the somewhat shady characters. I don't care what happens to them. No coffee for them. They're not nice. But it's really cozy and it's like a hug of a book. So I'm really excited to find out what happens next. And I hope it's all kinds of good things. And in the theme of my lovely relaxing day, in addition to reading a super enjoyable, lovely book, I have made some soup. I made a vegetable soup with like tiny little pasta stars. I saw it online and thought, that looks delicious and whimsical. So I made that and it was delicious and whimsical. So I'm very happy about that. And I've got loads of leftovers. So I don't need to make lunch for a few days. I have soup. And I also did some knitting because I find that really relaxing. So if anybody's into knitting in any way, I've done this. I'm knitting a sock because I like that. So I have knitted this, not this much, like I maybe started here today. And yeah, it's going to be a sock, going to be cozy and yeah, delightful. So my plan for the rest of the day is do a little bit more knitting. Kind of really want to get this finished and cast off. Fortunately, I have very tiny feet for my height, so it shouldn't take too much longer. And then I'm going to finish my book probably tomorrow and make that recipe. What I'm going to do is check what the recipe is, see if I have the ingredients, make them and finish the book with the recipe. That sounds like that would be the best use of my time. So I'm going to do that and I'll report back, hopefully with a delicious baked good. It is now my last day of annual leave and I finished Legends and Lattes and I absolutely loved it. I had a plan which was to pat the cat And also was to bake the recipe that's at the back of this book. And the recipe at the back of this book is for Thimbits, which are kind of like a biscotti, I think. But I don't have any cardamom. Well, I do, but it's really out of date. So I'm not going to make them right now. I'm going to make them next week, but I did still want to do a little bit of baking today. So the cat is next to me insisting on pats. He's wrapped up in a blanket on my bed. He was next to the heater, but I had to close the door to film. And he is somewhat raging at being moved, so I've built him a small cocoon, which he's not overly happy about either. But yes, so baking. I baked pain au chocolat today instead. And I say baked. I bought those like tubes of just roll pastry that they've even, you know, put the lines in where you have to tear them. So I literally just opened a tub, rolled things and chucked them in the air fryer. I didn't even put them in the oven. But what I did do is put marshmallows inside of mine. So they are completely inauthentic, but they are delicious. And I highly recommend putting marshmallows inside pastry. Delicious. Hotter than the sun, but still tasty. Next time I'll be baking the Thimbits from this book because they sound delicious. So, the book. I loved it. I think it was exactly what I needed to read to just relax before going back to work. The peril, there was mild peril, and there was more peril than I expected. So there were a few moments where I was a little bit, it's getting tense. But it was the kind of book that you go in knowing that you're going to have a good time and it's going to end well for the people who it's supposed to end well for, the goodies. I loved the characters. I felt like they all seemed to have their own flaws, but they did all kind of feel quite rounded. I loved Viv, and I loved how just determined she was to make a go of this coffee shop in Thun. And I did kind of wonder a little bit of why the coffee was gnomish coffee from like gnome country, and there were gnomes that lived in Thun. So I kind of wondered why there were no coffee shops in Thun, why a gnome hadn't made a coffee shop. But I think I might be overthinking a delightful book. The chances are extremely high that I am. And I loved Tandri. She was so organised and she was just like a beautiful compliment to Viv. And I feel like you could just see that they kind of needed each other to make the coffee shop work. I loved Cal, he was grumpy, and I was right. He ended up just becoming part of their little group. And I suspect that Cal might love coffee as much as I do. I did find myself drinking so much more coffee while reading this book just because the descriptions of the coffee and the food and the atmosphere was just so cozy, and reading about somebody loving and appreciating coffee made me think I could really go for a coffee. And I already drink arguably more coffee than I should. But I mean, I've no plans to stop. I stopped drinking coffee once and I was miserable. I like coffee. It brings me joy. So this book also brought me joy. I really loved, there was a sort of underworld organized crime story arc in this book, which was A, unexpected, and B, delightful, because it was the sort of story where they were introduced and I was a bit like, oh, I don't want this. No, I want good times in my lovely coffee shop. But Viv having none of it. And then we get to meet the head of this organization, who was not what was expected. And I would love a whole collection of books that give me more about Thun and maybe more about Viv's adventures. Really enjoyed that element of the book, and it's not a direction that I usually enjoy a book to go in. I usually find it just I get annoyed. But I didn't get annoyed by it in this because it was done in such a sort of low stakes way. There was also there were two kind of villains in the book. There was the organized crime element, and there was Viv's ex quest mate. The rest of her old group, they make little cameos, so it's lovely seeing them. But there's one guy who's a little bit grumpy. He felt that he maybe didn't get a fair deal out of the haul, but he did because he got what he asked for, and Viv got what she asked for. But then it turns out that he's a bit annoyed that Viv asked for something that might be worth more, and he feels aggrieved and entitled, and I hated him. And it's so nice in a book when you've got somebody to hate. I really didn't like him. But what I did really like was the way that everybody sort of banded together against like a common enemy. There was also a cat in this book. Not any kind of cat, a dire cat. And I've never heard of a dire cat before, but I would like to have many of them in my life. This one was called Amity, and I loved them. They were this giant cat that was protective of the coffee shop and seemed to love Viv and Tandy and all of their sort of patrons, but was also almost like a guard cat. Amazing. And I just feel like, do you know what I wanted from this book was that it was going to be a cozy read, a comfort read, and it was going to just let me feel the warm and fuzzies. And I know that that's a lot of pressure to put onto a book, and it is. But I feel like this book delivered because it made me feel happy and cozy. It was like a hug in a book. I have never, to my knowledge, or that I can think off the top of my head, I don't think I've ever read a book quite like this before. I read a lot of fantasy. I love fantasy so much, but I've never read anything that was just so cozy and warm and inviting. I've read so many fantasy books that do have elements of that, but there's also quite a lot more fear of what's going to happen. But I feel like this book was presented in such a way that you knew going in that it was going to end in nice times. And I think that for me just instantly made me feel somewhat relaxed going in, because normally if I hadn't known that this book was, you know, being pitched as a cozy comfort read, then I would have been terrified reading this, going, well, when's the bad thing happening? When are the characters that I love getting hurt? Oh, the cat. You know, I would have just been on edge. And I just feel like because I knew that it was high fantasy, low stakes, good company, that I could almost relax. I'm never fully relaxed, but I could try. So I had such a good time reading this book. It just really gave me what I wanted and what I needed. So yay, I'm very happy. This is my first book finished in 2023, and I'm finishing my first book with a 5-star. I couldn't not give it 5 stars. I want to give it 5 stars and a really nice double espresso. I'm so glad I read it. I'm so glad I bought it for my Secret Santa gift for myself, from myself. That was such a good gift. I'm so good at gifting. But I really liked if you sort of go past the surface level of it being a lovely little story, it's kind of got a few morals in it as well, which were similarly delightful, of just not giving up on your dream, no matter how difficult it might seem or how unrealistic, because Viv wanted to set up a coffee shop in Thun where a lot of people didn't even know what coffee was, and she still did it. She knew that people were perhaps going to be a little closed off to her because she was an orc, but she didn't let that stop her. And I know it's a book, but I thought that was a really sort of special and important message. And it was really like in Cinderella Story, which is one of my favorite films, it's amazing, there's a little bit where it's like never let the fear of striking out stop you from playing the game. And I feel like that was relevant here too, of just try it. It might work. Yeah. This is a book that I can definitely see myself going back to and rereading. It was cute, it was fun, it felt wholesome, and I loved the characters, and I mean, found family is definitely one of my favourite tropes ever. And it had that, and it had just joy. It had joy. It was a book of just sheer whimsy and loveliness. And it was set in like a world that I only have associated with playing Dungeons and Dragons, which I adore. But that's always kind of like stressful. There's a quest, there's threats. But this, there was a little bit of danger. There were elements of threat, but it really was a fun book. And I hope the author writes more books like that are in this vein, because it's what my heart wanted. And cozy reading, high fantasy, low stakes, it's what my heart wants. And now I'm kind of feeling, I mean, I'm not ready to go back to work. Are we ever ready to go back to work after a break? But I'm feeling as relaxed as I possibly can. I'm gonna have a bubble bath and then back to work. Yay! I would love to know if you've got a favourite comfort read. I've got a funny feeling that this might be my new one. Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!